phone slipped from my hands when I heard my own daughter Emma say those words that shattered my soul in half. Of course I'm not inviting my mother. Can you imagine the embarrassment she'll cause in front of Adrian's family? Her voice sounded so cold, so calculating, as if she were talking about discarding an old piece of furniture that no longer served its purpose. I stood there in the hallway of my own home with the receiver on the floor, and my heart beating so hard I thought it would explode. 64 years of life, 8 years of widowhood, and 38 years of being a mother to this creature, only to discover she considered me an embarrassment. The conversation continued on the other end of the line. Emma was talking to someone, probably Sarah, my daughter-in-law, that fourth-rate influencer who spends her time posting photos of the house I bought for my son Michael. You know how Mom is. George is going to think we're a family of... Well, you understand. Adrian is already doing enough by accepting where we come from. Where we come from? Had she forgotten that, thanks to where we come from, she was able to study architecture at the most expensive university in the country? That thanks to my ant-like work, getting up at 5 in the morning for decades to build my small real estate empire, she can now afford to be selective with her clients? My legs trembled and I had to lean against the wall. The wallpaper Emma had chosen last year when I redecorated. Your house, Mom, so it looks more modern, now seemed like a mockery. Everything in this house screamed of the money I had earned with my own hands, the same money she spent like water. Besides, you know Mom won't know how to behave. She'll show up in one of those horrible dresses she buys at the market. She'll talk too loud. She'll tell embarrassing stories from when we were kids. Emma let out a nervous giggle that turned my blood cold. Adrian's family is very refined. His brother George is a diplomat. His mother was Miss Universe in the 80s. Can you imagine my mom trying to converse with those people? The receiver was still on the floor, but I couldn't move. Each word was like a dagger straight to the chest. This was the same little girl who used to crawl into my bed when she had nightmares. The same one who hugged me crying when other girls made fun of her worn-out shoes. The same one who swore that when she grew up she would take care of me forever. Michael agrees with me, Emma continued. He also thinks it's better if Mum doesn't come. It's already going to be weird enough explaining why Dad isn't there. We don't need more drama. Michael, my baby, the son I carried in my arms during his first 2 years because he was so sickly. The same one whose law degree I paid for, and whose first apartment I bought when he married Sarah. Both of them, my 2 children, had decided I was an embarrassment. Emma's laughter echoed throughout the empty house. The best part is she won't even notice. Lately she's been so absent-minded, so, old. She probably won't even remember there's a wedding. That's when something inside me broke definitively. It wasn't just the exclusion. It wasn't just the shame. It was the underestimation. They thought I was a silly, senile old woman they could manipulate at will. But they didn't know who they were messing with. I wasn't the absent-minded little old lady they believed me to be. I was Margaret Wilson, the woman who had turned a small loan of $5,000 into a real estate empire of 20 properties. The same woman who had raised 2 children alone after their father died, working 18 hours a day so they would never lack anything. I hung up the phone carefully, as if it were made of crystal. My mind was already working at full speed, like in the old days when I had to solve financial crises or negotiate with contractors who thought they could deceive me because I was a woman. I had learned long ago that revenge is best served cold, and that patience is the most powerful weapon an intelligent woman can have. I headed to my study, that small sanctuary full of filing cabinets and contracts that my children had always avoided, as if it were radioactive. "Mom's boring papers," Emma used to say when she was little. How ironic that those boring papers were exactly what had financed their luxuries throughout their lives. I turned on the computer and began reviewing all the transfers I had made in the last 5 years. Emma, luxury apartment in the city center, $400,000. Michael, house in the suburbs, $600,000. Emma again, BMW car, $300,000. Michael, wedding expenses with Sarah, $200,000. Emma, master's degree in Europe, $500,000. The list was endless. Each transfer had a sweet, manipulative justification. "Mom, it's an investment in my future." "Sarah is pregnant and we need more space." "It's just a loan. I'll pay you back in 6 months." Loans that were never repaid. Investments that only benefited them. While reviewing the numbers, I remembered perfectly how it had all begun. It was 3 years after Robert's death, my husband. I was devastated, lost, trying to navigate the world alone for the first time in my life. Emma had come home with tears in her eyes. "Mom, I've been offered an incredible job opportunity, but I need to look more professional. Could you help me with a small loan to update my wardrobe?" Small loan, $30,000 for clothes. But I had said yes because seeing her cry broke my heart, because I wanted her to have all the opportunities I never had. That had been my first mistake, confusing love with money. Then it was Michael. "Mom, Sarah and I want to start a family, but this apartment is too small. Could you help us with the down payment? Just the down payment. We'll pay the rest." Of course. 6 months later, they came back. "The monthly payments are really high, and Sarah had to stop working because of the pregnancy. In the end, I ended up paying for the entire house. The pattern had always been the same. They would come with a sad story, an urgent need, a promise of independence. This is the last time, Mom. After this, we won't bother you anymore. It's just until we get stable. Sweet lies wrapped in kisses on the cheek and calculated hugs, but I had been stupid. I had confused their need for my money with true love. I had believed I was a generous mother, when in reality, I was an emotional ATM. They would come, press the right buttons, and I would spit out bills. The most painful revelation came when I found the credit card statements I had put in their names. Emma had spent $50,000 last month, Michael $40,000, on expensive restaurants, designer clothes, weekend trips. They lived like millionaires with my money while I kept buying my clothes at the market and cooking at home to save. The phone rang. It was Emma. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" Her voice was now honeyed, affectionate, completely different from the one she had used an hour earlier to talk about me, as if I were a burden. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come to my house tomorrow? It's about the wedding." "Of course, my love. I'll come tomorrow," I replied with the sweetest voice I could fake. But inside, a cold smile was drawing on my lips. I knew exactly what Emma wanted to discuss with me. It wasn't my presence at her wedding, but my money to finance it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake until 3 a.m, reviewing every document, every contract, every bank transfer. My brain worked like a calculating machine, adding up years of misinterpreted generosity and unrequited love, but also planning, because if there was something I had learned in my decades as a businesswoman, it was that information is power, and I had a lot of information. The next day, I arrived at Emma's house at exactly 10 a.m, as we had agreed. I wore my simplest dress, the one she hated so much, and my worn synthetic leather bag. I wanted to look exactly like the harmless old lady they thought I was. Emma greeted me with a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and lies. "Mom, I'm so glad you came. Sit down. I made you coffee." She served me in one of the fine porcelain cups I had given her for her birthday, part of a set that cost more than a secretary's monthly salary, as everything in her house screamed luxury. The Italian furniture, the giant screen TV, the works of art that decorated the walls. My money turned into objects to impress strangers. "Look, Mom, I wanted to talk to you about the wedding." Emma sat across from me, crossing her legs with studied elegance. "You know, Adrian and I want something very special, very elegant. His family's very distinguished." There was that word. Again, distinguished. As if I were a second-class product that needed to be hidden so as not to ruin her premium image. I nodded, faking the silly smile she expected from me. "The problem is that costs have skyrocketed much more than we thought. The venue we want costs $200,000 just for the rental. Then there's the food, flowers, music, photographer." Emma made a dramatic pause, as if the numbers were terribly overwhelming. "In total, we're talking about almost $800,000. $800,000. It was more money than many families see in their entire lives." Emma said it as if it were a reasonable amount for a 6-hour party. I took a sip of coffee and kept my expression neutral. "Adrian has put in his share, of course. His family is also contributing. But..." Another calculated pause. "We need you to cover the difference. It's about $400,000, said so casually, as if asking to borrow $20 for the bus. Emma played with her engagement ring while she spoke, that nervous gesture she'd had since childhood when she lied. Because she was lying. I knew perfectly, well, that Adrian's family hadn't contributed a cent. I knew because I had investigated. "I know it's a lot of money, Mom, but think of it as an investment in my future. Adrian has very important contacts. This wedding can open many doors for my career. Besides," her voice became honeyed, manipulative, "this will be the last big favor I ask of you. After this, we'll be completely independent. The last time." How many times had I heard that phrase? It was like a broken record that repeated every time they needed money. "The last time I bother you, Mom. After this, we won't need anything. It's the last investment in our future." Lies I had swallowed over and over like a fool, in love with the illusion of being needed. "And Mom," Emma leaned forward, taking my hands in hers, perfectly manicured. "I know we haven't officially invited you yet, but it's because we want to surprise you. The truth is, we're planning something very intimate, very family-oriented. Only the closest people. More lies." I had seen the guest list lying on her coffee table. 250 people, politicians, business people, influencers, all the important people. Emma needed to build her image as a successful woman, but her own mother wasn't on that list. "I just need you to confirm the money so I can book everything. The vendors are waiting." Emma squeezed my hands, feigning vulnerability. "I trust you, Mom. You've always been there for me. I had always been there to pay for her whims, to finance her dreams, to clean up her financial messes. But when I needed emotional support, when I felt lonely, after Robert's death, when Sundays became eternal in this empty house, they weren't there." "Of course, my love," I replied with the same maternal smile I had perfected over the years. "You know I'll always support you in everything." Emma sighed with relief, as if she had been holding her breath. She had no idea that I already knew the whole truth. "You're the best mom in the world," she said, kissing my cheek with those lips that tasted of falsehood. "I promise this wedding will be perfect. Adrian is so grateful to you. He always talks, about how lucky he is to have such a generous mother-in-law. Adrian, the perfect boyfriend who had never directed more than 5 words in a row at me in the 2 years he'd been dating Emma. The same one who became uncomfortable every time I came to visit them, as if my presence contaminated the sophisticated atmosphere they had created. But of course, my money didn't contaminate them, that they received with open arms. When I left Emma's house, I drove straight to William's office, my accountant and one of the few true friends I had left. William had been Robert's right hand in the business, and after his death had become my most trusted advisor. He was one of the few men I knew who didn't underestimate me for being a woman. "Margaret, what a surprise to see you here. Everything okay?" William stood up from his desk with a genuine smile, one of those I no longer received at home. His office smelled of coffee and old papers, an aroma that calmed me because it reminded me of the time when Robert and I built our empire together. "William, I need you to do me a very special favor. I want to review exactly how much money I've transferred to my children in the last 5 years. Everything, down to the last penny." I sat across from his desk, crossing my hands over my lap like the executive I had been for decades. William frowned. "Are you sure? Those numbers can be shocking." He knew my family well. He had been a silent witness to all their requests for money, all their financial emergencies that invariably became my responsibility. "I'm more than sure. I want exact numbers, dates, concepts. And I want you to tell me what my real financial situation would be if I stopped supporting them financially." My voice was firm, businesslike. It had been years since I'd heard myself speak like this. William worked for 2 hours typing numbers, reviewing transfers, calculating totals. I sat there watching as the years of my generosity turned into cold, brutal figures. When he finished, he handed me a sheet with numbers that took my breath away. "In 5 years, Margaret, you've transferred $2,800,000 to Emma and Michael. That's not counting the properties you've put in their names, the credit cards you pay monthly, and the life insurance policies where they're beneficiaries." William looked at me with a mixture of compassion and admiration. "You're an incredibly generous woman. Generous. What a nice word to describe what had actually been my systematic stupidity. Toith on the $800,000. It was more money than most people earn in their entire productive lives, and I had given it to 2 people who considered me an embarrassment. Now tell me, William, if I completely cut off financial support, how long do you think they could sustain themselves?" It was a rhetorical question. We both knew the answer. Emma spends more than she earns each month. Her job as an architect allows her to live modestly, but not for the lifestyle she leads. Michael is better off, but the mortgage, Sarah's expenses, the luxuries. I'd say 3 months maximum before they're in serious trouble. 3 months. All their arrogance, all their shame toward me, all their supposed independence would crumble in 3 months without my money. It was valuable information, but also devastating. I had created 2 financial monsters who didn't know how to live without sucking on my bank account. That night, alone in my house, I made a decision that would change everything. I poured myself a glass of wine, the expensive wine Emma had given me for my last birthday, paid for with my money, of course, and sat in my favorite armchair, the same armchair where Robert used to read me the financial news aloud, where we had planned every investment, every strategic move in our business. I took out my phone and dialed George's number, Adrian's brother. I had investigated enough to know he was a diplomat, a serious and respectable person. If Emma was so ashamed of me, it was time for him to know exactly who the woman financing his brother-in-law's wedding was. "Good evening, George." This is Margaret Wilson, Emma's mother. I apologize for calling so late, but I need to talk to you about something very important related to your brother's wedding." George's voice sounded surprised but polite. "Of course, Mrs. Wilson. Tell me how I can help you." "George, I need to clarify some things about the wedding expenses. My daughter told me your family is contributing financially, but I think there's a misunderstanding. I want to make sure we're all on the same page." My voice sounded sweet, innocent, like a confused old lady who just wanted to avoid problems. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm afraid I don't understand. We haven't agreed to any financial contribution. Adrian told us you and Emma had everything covered." His voice betrayed genuine confusion. Perfect. Emma had lied about that too. Oh, how strange. Well, don't worry, George. I'll take care of all the expenses, as always. I let that last phrase hang in the air like an accidental confession. As always. George now sounded intrigued. "Excuse my curiosity, Mrs. Wilson, but have you been financing Emma for a long time?" "There was my opportunity. Well, a mother does what she has to do for her children, right? Emma has had some financial challenges. Her apartment, her car, her studies in Europe. We've handled all of that as a family." I made a calculated pause. "But don't worry. I have enough properties to cover any expense." Properties. That word always caught people's attention. George was a diplomat. He knew the value of real estate. "How generous of you, ma'am. Adrian never mentioned that Emma had financial needs." "Oh, Emma is very proud. She doesn't like people to know she depends on her mother. But between us, George, she couldn't maintain her lifestyle without my help." Each word was a time bomb that Emma wouldn't see coming. After hanging up, I dialed Michael's number. It was time to test the loyalty of my younger son, who had always been weaker, more manipulable than Emma. If there was any chance that one of my children could be saved, it was him. "Hi, Mom. Everything okay?" "It's very late." Michael's voice sounded sleepy but also nervous. Emma had probably already told him about our money conversation. "Michael, my love, I need to talk to you about something very serious. It's about your sister's wedding." I settled into the armchair, preparing for the performance of my life. Emma asked me for money for the wedding. A lot of money. "But there's something that worries me." "What is it, Mom?" Now Michael sounded completely awake. "Well, lately I've been thinking a lot about my future, about what's going to happen to me when I'm older. You have your own lives, your own families." I let my voice break slightly, as if it were a painful confession. "Mom, what are you talking about? You're perfectly fine." But I could hear the discomfort in his voice. Michael knew exactly where this conversation was going. "Yes, I'm fine now. But what about in 5 years? In 10? I don't want to be a burden to you." I made a dramatic pause. "I've been thinking about selling some properties and moving to a smaller place, something I can manage alone." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Michael was calculating. If I sold the properties, if I moved, if I became independent, their source of extra income would end. The houses he expected to inherit, the loans he never repaid, the economic cushion I represented. "Mom, don't say those things. We would never abandon you. You're part of our family." Sweet lies wrapped in poorly disguised panic. Oh, Michael, how good to hear that. Because the truth is, sometimes I feel like I'm in the way. Like with Emma's wedding. I left the sentence incomplete, waiting for his reaction. What about Emma's wedding? Michael tried to sound casual, but I knew that voice. It was the same one he used when he was a child and had broken something. Well, Emma told me they're doing something very intimate, very small, only the most important people. And I understand, you know. At my age, I don't fit into those elegant celebrations anymore. My voice was pure maternal manipulation, mixing resignation with a pinch of martyrdom. Michael swallowed audibly. Mom, I didn't know Emma had told you that. There must be a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, my love. Emma was very clear. She says Adrian's family is very distinguished, very refined, and I'm just an old woman who doesn't know how to behave in society. Each word was a dagger straight to his conscience. Mom, that's not true. You're... Michael stopped. He couldn't complete the sentence without lying blatantly, and we both knew it. It's okay, Michael. I understand perfectly. You've grown up. You've risen socially. It's natural that you're ashamed of your mother who comes from the market. I made a long pause. I just hope that when I move and sell everything, you'll understand it was because I wanted to give you space to shine without my shadow. The line remained silent for almost a minute. Michael was processing the implications of my words. If I moved, if I sold the properties, if I became independent, they would have to learn to live on their own resources. Mom, don't make hasty decisions. Let me talk to Emma. There must be a very big misunderstanding. Michael's voice trembled slightly. I could hear Sarah in the background asking what was happening, her high-pitched, worried voice. I promise we'll fix this. I don't want you to fight because of me, my love. If Emma thinks it's better that I don't go, I respect her decision. After all, it's her special day. My voice was pure maternal resignation, but inside I was smiling. Michael was panicking, and that meant my plan was working. Mom, we never wanted to hurt you. Let me talk to Emma first thing tomorrow. Don't do anything until we talk. Now Michael sounded desperate. Okay, my love, but I've already made an important decision. Today I told Emma yes. I'll give her the money for her wedding. $400,000 will be my farewell gift before I simplify my life. The lie left my lips like poisoned honey. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael was processing that Emma had asked for $400,000 while excluding him from the conversation. The siblings had always competed for my money, but they had learned to coordinate to maximize their gains. This broke their alliance. $400,000? Emma asked you for that much money? Michael's voice had changed. Now there was a note of betrayal in it. Yes, for the venue, the food, the flowers. She says it's going to be a very elegant wedding. I suppose, since you're already married, you don't need anything, right? Another calculated lie. Michael and Sarah were always asking for money for something. House renovations, vacations, Sarah's new car. Mom, we also have expenses. Sarah is pregnant again, and we're going to need to expand the house. Michael took the bait perfectly. Sarah is pregnant? What wonderful news. I feigned surprise and joy, although I knew perfectly well it was a lie. Sarah had posted photos drinking wine on her social media the week before. Of course I'll help you with that too. After all, you do include me in your lives. That last phrase was the final blow. Michael understood the message perfectly. Emma received money but excluded me. He included me but received nothing. It was an equation that didn't suit him at all. I hung up the phone, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in a long time, I had control of the situation. My children were used to manipulating me, but they had forgotten that I had been a businesswoman long before I was a mother. I knew all the negotiation tactics, all the pressure, strategies. The next day, early in the morning, the show began. Emma called me hysterical at 7 in the morning. Mom, what did you tell Michael? He's furious with me. He says I'm selfish, that I'm excluding him from everything. Good morning, my love. I don't understand why Michael is upset. I just told him about your wedding, about how beautiful it's going to be. My voice was that of an innocent old lady who doesn't understand why everyone is yelling. You told him I asked you for $400,000 and that I'm excluding him from the wedding. Emma was losing control, something very rare for her. She had always been calculating, cold. Well, it's the truth, isn't it? You asked me for that money yesterday. I made an innocent pause. And about Michael? Well, he asked me if he was going to be at the wedding, and I told him it was only for important people. I thought he knew. Emma cursed under her breath. Mom, Michael is my brother. Of course he's invited to my wedding. Oh, how good to know. So when you said important people, you were only referring to me. I understand. My voice dripped with hurt innocence. I didn't mean... Mom, of course you're important. It's just that... Emma got stuck, unable to explain why her mother wasn't important enough for her own wedding. Don't worry, my love. I already got the message. That's why I decided to simplify my life. Yesterday I talked to a real estate agent about selling some properties. If you don't need me as a mother anymore, at least I won't be a financial burden. I let those words penetrate her brain like acid. You're going to sell properties. Which properties? Emma's voice had lost all pretense. Now it was pure financial panic. Well, first the beach house, then the downtown apartments. George gave me very good advice yesterday on how to liquidate assets intelligently. I mentioned George casually, as if it had been a routine conversation. You talked to George? Adrian's brother? Now Emma sounded on the verge of a heart attack. Yes, what an educated young man. He explained that his family won't be contributing financially to the wedding, that Adrian told them you and I had everything under control. Dramatic pause. He asked me a lot about my properties. He seemed very impressed. Emma hung up without saying goodbye. I knew she was running to call Adrian, probably to ask him what exactly he had told his family about the Wilsons' financial situation. Over the next 3 days, my phone didn't stop ringing. It was like watching dominoes fall one by one. First, Michael called trying to convince me to have lunch with him and Sarah to clear things up. Then Emma, with a strangely sweet voice, inviting me for coffee to plan the wedding details together. Then Michael again, offering to take me to the doctor because lately I sounded very stressed. But the most revealing call came Thursday night. It was Jessica, my 16-year-old granddaughter, Michael and Sarah's daughter. Her voice sounded different, more mature than usual. Grandma, can I come see you tomorrow after school? I need to talk to you. Jessica had always been special, the only one in the family who seemed to inherit my business instinct and my ability to see through lies. Of course, my love. Come whenever you want. Jessica was my weakness, the only person in this family who loved me without economic conditions. The next day, Jessica arrived at my house in her school uniform with a serious expression that reminded me of myself at her age. She sat in the kitchen, refused the juice I offered her, and got straight to the point. Grandma, Dad, and Mom have been talking about you a lot lately, arguing in low voices, closing conversations when I enter the room. Jessica had Robert's eyes, those eyes that didn't miss any detail. Mom is obsessed with checking her bank accounts, and Dad looks super stressed. And what do you think about all that, my love? I asked, genuinely curious about the perspective of the only honest person in this family. I think they're scared you'll stop supporting them. Jessica looked me straight, in the eyes. And I think it's about time. Her words impacted me more than all her parents' desperate calls. Here was a 16-year-old teenager who perfectly understood the toxic dynamic I had been feeding for years. Grandma, I've been watching this family all my life. I've seen how Dad and Aunt Emma constantly ask you for money, how Mom plans expensive purchases just before visiting you, how everyone acts differently when they need something. Jessica spoke with a maturity that broke my heart. And I've also seen how you give them everything, without asking for anything in return. It's what a mother does, Jessica, a grandmother. I tried to justify decades of behavior I already knew was wrong. No, Grandma. A mother teaches her children to be independent. A grandmother loves them, but doesn't turn them into parasites. Jessica took my hands in hers. Mom told me yesterday that if you sell the properties, we'll have to move to a smaller place, as if it were a tragedy that we had to live on the money Dad earns. Jessica's brutal honesty left me speechless. I had raised 2 children who didn't know the value of money because they never had to earn it. And now, they were raising their own children with the same mentality of entitlement and dependence. Jessica, did you know that Emma didn't invite me to her wedding? I asked, needing to know how far the family conspiracy went. Jessica nodded sadly. Mom told me as if it were normal. She said Aunt Emma wanted an elegant wedding, and you wouldn't fit in. I asked her how she could exclude her own mother, and she told me I didn't understand because I was too young. Jessica squeezed my hands. But I do understand, Grandma. I understand they're ashamed of you because you're real, because you worked hard, because you don't pretend to be something you're not. At that moment, seeing my granddaughter defend my dignity when my own children trampled it, I made the final decision. Jessica was the only one who deserved my inheritance, the only one who had inherited my real values. Jessica, I need you to help me with something very important, but it's going to require you to keep some secrets, even from your parents. My voice had become conspiratorial, businesslike. What do you need, Grandma? Jessica leaned forward, her eyes shining with curiosity. I need you to help me organize a family meeting. I want everyone to be present Saturday night. Tell them I have something very important to announce about my future. I smiled with a coldness I hadn't felt in years. And I need you to bring your phone to record everything that's going to happen. Jessica looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. Grandma, what are you planning? Justice, my love. After 64 years of life, I'm finally going to serve a dish of justice served cold. And you're going to witness how a woman recovers her dignity. That night, after Jessica left, I sat in my study and finished preparing all the documents. Bank transfers, account statements, screenshots of conversations, call recordings. Everything meticulously organized in folders bearing each of my children's names. Saturday would be the day the Wilson family would finally understand who had been controlling the money all along. Saturday night, they all arrived at my house at exactly 8 o'clock, as I had requested. Emma arrived first, elegant and nervous, carrying a bouquet of expensive flowers she had probably bought with my money. Michael and Sarah arrived 5 minutes later with Jessica walking behind them, the phone discreetly ready in her pocket. Mom, how nice that you've brought us together. We haven't had a family dinner in so long, Emma said, kissing my cheek with those lips that tasted of rehearsed lies. Yes, I needed to talk to all of you about some important decisions I've made. I replied, indicating they should sit in the living room. I had prepared coffee and cookies like in the old days, when we really were a family. Sarah settled on the couch, constantly checking her phone. Michael kept touching his watch, nervous. Emma smiled too much, that forced smile she used when she wanted something. Only Jessica appeared calm, sitting in the corner armchair, observing everything with those intelligent eyes that didn't miss any detail. Well, as you know, lately I've been reflecting a lot on my future, on what's going to happen to me when I'm older, I began, serving coffee in the cups Emma had chosen for me last year. And I've also been thinking about you, about your lives, about everything you've achieved. Emma leaned forward. Mom, you're perfectly fine. You don't need to worry about those things yet. Of course I do, Emma. At my age, you have to be realistic. I took a sip of coffee, savoring the moment. That's why I've made some very important decisions about my assets. The silence in the room became thick. Michael stopped, touching his watch. Sarah looked up from her phone. Emma maintained her smile, but I saw the muscles in her neck tense. First, I want to tell you about a very interesting conversation I had with George, Adrian's brother. I directed my gaze toward Emma, who instantly went pale. It turns out he had no idea you expected financial contribution from his family for the wedding. Mom, that was a misunderstanding. Emma began to speak, but I raised my hand to silence her. Let me finish, my love. George was very interested when I told him about all the properties I own, about how I've been financing my family. For years, I smiled sweetly. He found it very generous of me to support adult children who have professional careers. Michael cleared his throat. Mom, we're not supported. We have jobs, our own earnings. Really, Michael? I took out the first folder of documents I had prepared. According to my records, in the last 5 years, I've transferred $200,000 to you. Your salary as a lawyer is $40,000 per month. Without my help, you couldn't even pay your house mortgage. Michael was speechless. Sarah looked at him with an expression that mixed panic with reproach. It was obvious she didn't know the exact figures of their economic dependence. And you, Emma. I took out the second folder. In the same period, you've received $600,000. Your job as an architect allows you to live modestly, but not for the apartment in the city center, nor the BMW, nor the trips to Europe. Emma tried to maintain her composure. Mom, those were loans, investments in our future. Loans? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. Emma, show me a single document where repayment terms are established. A single paper where you acknowledge you owe me money. Total silence. Because those documents didn't exist. They had never intended to pay anything back. But the most interesting thing, I continued, is that during all these years when I've given you millions of dollars, you've decided I'm not good enough to be in your important lives. I took out my phone and played the recording of Emma talking about the wedding. Her own voice filled the room. Of course I'm not inviting my mother. Can you imagine the embarrassment she'll cause in front of Adrian's family? Emma stood up as if she'd been electrocuted. Mom, did you record that conversation? I didn't record anything, Emma. You simply forgot to hang up the phone when you were talking to Sarah. I lied with icy calm. For 20 minutes, I listened to how you talked about me, as if I were an embarrassing burden. Michael tried to mediate. Emma, is that true? Did you really say those things? It's not what it seems. I was stressed, worried about the wedding. Emma stammered, losing all her studied elegance. You were worried about looking bad with your boyfriend's family, a family that, by the way, isn't contributing a single penny to your $800,000 wedding. My voice had become sharp, businesslike. A wedding I'm going to finance completely, but to which I'm not invited. Sarah finally spoke in a small, nervous voice. Mother-in-law, there must be an explanation. The explanation is very simple, Sarah. My children have lived like millionaires with my money, but they're ashamed of the woman who works to give it to them. I stood up, feeling an energy I hadn't experienced in years. That's why I've made definitive decisions about my future and yours. Effective immediately. All credit cards in your names are canceled. All monthly transfers are permanently suspended. All properties in your names return to my control. My voice was firm as steel, each word calculated for maximum impact. Emma jumped from her seat. Mom, you can't do that. I have commitments, scheduled payments. Of course I can, Emma. They're my cards, my money, my properties. I only put them in your names for tax convenience, but legally they're still mine. I took out a folder full of legal documents. William has already prepared all the documentation. It goes into effect Monday. Michael looked devastated. Mom, we have a mortgage, Jessica's expenses, the life we've built. The life I built for you, Michael, with my work, my money, my sacrifice. I addressed him with icy calm. And now you're going to learn to build your own life with your own resources. Sarah was crying silently. Emma paced back and forth like a caged beast. Michael had his head in his hands. Only Jessica remained serene, discreetly recording everything. This is emotional blackmail, Emma shouted. You're punishing us for a private conversation. Emotional blackmail? My laugh came out cold and sharp. Emma, you plan to get married with my money at a party I'm not invited to. And I'm the blackmailer? Adrian is going to cancel everything. His family is going to think we're scammers. Emma was completely losing control. Maybe you should have thought of that before calling me an embarrassment in front of that same family. I sat down calmly, enjoying watching her fall apart. But don't worry, Emma. I have a proposal. Everyone looked at me with desperate hope. You can keep the money for the wedding, the $400,000 you asked for. But on one condition. I sat at the main table. You proudly introduce me as your hard-working mother, who financed all your education, and publicly thank the woman who made your life of luxury possible. Emma paled. I can't do that. Adrian's family. Then there's no money. And without money, there's no wedding. I shrugged. You decide what's more important. Your false image or your marriage? Settle tried one last plea. Mom, think about it. We're your family, your only children. My only children who are ashamed of me, who lie to me, who use me as an ATM. I stood up and walked toward Jessica. But I'm not completely cruel. Jessica isn't to blame for having parasitic parents. I put my hand on my granddaughter's shoulder. Jessica, you remain my universal beneficiary. When I die, everything will be yours. But when you turn 18, you'll also have access to an educational fund I've created specifically for you. Jessica hugged me tightly. Thank you, Grandma. But I just want you to be happy. I'm going to be happy, my love, for the first time in years. I looked at my children, who watched me with a mixture of shock and desperation. I'm moving next week. I bought a beautiful apartment in Scottsdale, near the lake. Jessica can visit me whenever she wants. You're moving? Michael looked lost. And I'm selling this house. I already have a buyer. I smiled with genuine satisfaction. A young couple who's going to turn it into a home full of true love. Emma collapsed on the couch. Mom, you can't destroy our family like this. I didn't destroy anything, Emma. You destroyed this family when you decided my money was more valuable than my presence. I headed toward the door. The meeting is over. You have until Wednesday to collect your things from my house. 3 months later, I was sitting on the terrace of my new apartment drinking coffee while watching the sunrise over the lake. Jessica came to visit me every weekend, telling me about her university plans, her dreams of studying business administration. She was the only one who had inherited my entrepreneurial spirit. Emma canceled the wedding. Adrian left her when he found out the whole truth about her economic situation. Michael and Sarah had to sell the house and move to a small apartment. They both got part-time jobs to survive. They never asked for forgiveness. They never acknowledged their mistake. But they also never asked for money again. I found peace in the silence, in the mornings by the lake, in the afternoons reading books I hadn't had time to enjoy for years, in the evenings planning Jessica's business future. I had learned the most important lesson of my life, that true love can't be bought with money, and that dignity is priceless. My children chose money over love. I chose my peace over their parasitism, and I never ever looked back. 2 years after that night that changed everything, I received an unexpected call. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was watering my plants on the terrace when the phone rang. The name that appeared on the screen surprised me. Michael. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded different, more mature, tired. I know I have no right to call you after so long, but I needed to talk to you. I sat in my favorite chair, the one I had bought with my own savings, without asking anyone's opinion. Tell me, Michael. Mom, Sarah and I are getting divorced. His voice broke slightly. It turns out when your money ran out, she realized she didn't love the man I really am, but the lifestyle you gave us. I felt neither satisfaction nor sadness, just a kind of cosmic inevitability. I'm sorry, Michael. Don't be sorry, Mom. And you're right not to be. Michael paused for a long time. These 2 years have been the hardest of my life, but also the most honest. For the first time in decades, I had to face who I really am, without your money as a shield. I heard the background noise of a coffee shop. Michael was in some public place, probably gathering courage for this call for hours. And who are you, Michael? I asked with genuine curiosity. I'm a mediocre lawyer who for years felt entitled to his mother's money. I'm a father who taught his daughter that money is asked for, not earned. I'm a man who is ashamed of the hardest working woman he knows. His voice trembled. I'm a coward who let his sister mistreat you because it suited me financially. His words were like knives, but knives that were finally cutting in the right direction. Mom, I'm not calling to ask for money. I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I'm calling to tell you that I finally understand what you did to us. Michael took a deep breath. You forced us to grow up. I remained silent, processing his words. Outside, an elderly couple walked hand in hand around the lake. I had been watching them take the same walk every afternoon for 2 years and always wondered if that's what true love looked like. Michael, how is Jessica? It was the question that really mattered to me. Jessica is incredible. She got straight A's this semester. She got a part-time job at an accounting firm. She says she wants to learn the value of money before inheriting yours. Michael laughed, but it wasn't a bitter laugh. She's identical to you, Mom. She has that determination, that intelligence for business. And Emma? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Emma. Michael sighed. Emma is working at a small architecture firm. She lives in a modest apartment, drives a used car. She looks real for the first time in years. But she's also furious. Furious? Why? because she discovered that all the important contacts she thought she had were actually contacts of your money. When the expensive dinners and costly gifts ended, so did the false friendships. Michael paused. Adrian married an heiress 6 months after leaving her. I got up from my chair and walked to the terrace railing. The sun was beginning to set, painting the lake golden. It was a spectacle I never tired of seeing. Michael, why are you telling me all this? Because I want you to know your plan worked. You broke us to rebuild us. And although Emma still doesn't understand it, I do. His voice had become firm. I want you to know I'm learning to be a better man. And Sarah, how is she handling the divorce? Michael laughed bitterly. Sarah already has a new boyfriend, an older businessman who supports her just like I supported her with your money. Some never learn. We remained silent for several minutes. I watched the sunset. He probably looking at his cold coffee in some anonymous coffee shop. Mom, there's something else I need to tell you. Michael took a deep breath. The day you turned 66, Jessica asked me why we didn't call to wish you a happy birthday. I didn't know what to answer. My birthday had passed in silence, only with Jessica, who came to visit me with a homemade cake and a handmade card. It had been perfect. I didn't need calls, Michael. Yes, you needed them, Mom, and we needed to make them. But we were too proud, too hurt in our ego to admit we missed you. Michael was quiet for a moment. I missed you. Not as an ATM, but as a mother. I felt something wet on my cheeks and realized I was crying. Not from sadness, but from something more complex. Maybe relief, maybe hope. Michael, what do you expect from this call? Nothing, Mom. Absolutely nothing. I just wanted you to know that the man you raised still exists beneath all the garbage I accumulated on top. His voice broke again. And I wanted you to know that I'm proud to be the son of Margaret Wilson, the woman who built an empire with her own hands. I hung up the phone and stood there, watching the last lights of the day fade over the water. For the first time in 2 years, I felt something like hope for my family. Maybe true love isn't bought with money, but sometimes it's found in the silence that remains when the money runs out.